So, the first legs of the last 16 ties of the UEFA Champions League were played across Tuesday and Wednesday this week. And for English football, a sobering reality, a fall from just a month ago. So, let's run through the results first, and then we'll have a look at what this actually means rather than all the noise that's been going on this week. So, Arsenal drew 1-1 away to Bayer Leverkusen. Chelsea lost 5-2 away at Paris Saint-Germain. Manchester City lost 3-0 away to Real Madrid. And on the Tuesday, Liverpool lost 1-0 away to Galatasaray. Tottenham lost 5-2 away to Atletico Madrid. And Newcastle drew 1-1 with Barcelona. So the obvious thing that stands out is none of the English teams won any of their games, and two of them were beaten 5-2. Now, a month ago, at the end of the league stage, the headlines were all about English domination. We'd had 6 clubs qualify for the knockout stages. No one had ever done this before. And coupled with the financial results, of which a number of English clubs, were in the top 10, the Premier League was the league. But when I did the video a month ago at the end of the league phase, I argued that English domination should be measured in terms of trophies and success. So the English period from 1977 to 1984, one example. I also argued about the Spanish domination, with Real Madrid, Barcelona and Atletico Madrid, in the 2010s. And the fact that when Chelsea beat Betis in the Conference League final last year, that was the first time that a Spanish club had lost to a non-Spanish club in a major European final since Bayern Munich beat Valencia in the 2001 Champions League final, so almost a quarter of a decade. So that is domination to me. So I did not buy into this English domination just because we'd had 6 clubs qualify. From a league stage, which I've argued time and again, it's harder to get eliminated. I mean, you've just got to finish in the top 24. You could win half your games, 4 out of 8 games, and still qualify. So should never be difficult for Premier League clubs to qualify from the league stage. Now, on the surface of it, because none of the English clubs won their games across Tuesday and Wednesday, it does look like a big disaster. But actually, bar one of the results, I think all the results went kind of the way I expected, bar the scorelines. So let's start with Arsenal. Now, 1-1 away to Leverkusen with a late penalty doesn't appear to be a great result. But let's put this into context. Arsenal are not ripping up the Premier League by playing amazing passing football and beating teams 4 and 5-0. Yes, they came top of the group, in this league stage by winning all of their games, but knockout football is completely different. And I think Arsenal's result at Leverkusen is a brilliant result. They've done the hard bit. They didn't lose away. They take it back to the Emirates next week, and then they can, they don't have to make up a deficit. So that is the perfect away result for Arsenal. Manchester City, on the other hand, now this is the result that did surprise me because I thought this would be closer, have given themselves an absolute mountain to climb. Now, I'll come on to Chelsea and Tottenham and Newcastle in a bit, but this is a game you'd expect Manchester City, even if they don't win it, to at least put up a good fight and be within a goal. So losing 2-1 or 3-2 or something like that. But to lose 3-0 and Real Madrid to also miss a penalty, this is the one result, as I say, I don't know what Manchester City were thinking, because however much the competition has changed from the simple home and away legs of the European Champions Club Cup to the bloated tournament we have now, in home and away legs, the thing doesn't change. When you are away, especially in the first leg, you need to give yourself the best chance for the home leg. And losing 3-0 to a Real Madrid team, which is good, but it's not as good as what the Real Madrid teams were of the kind of the mid, like 2014, 2016, that kind of era. To lose 3-0 like this, I think, is a very, very bad result. And I think it's actually one of the worst results of the night because I think Manchester City, this game could have gone either way at the outset. And I think Manchester City have probably played this wrong. Now, Galatasaray-Liverpool. I look at this objectively. So there's a lot of noise about Arne Slot, and there has been for a long time, and how Liverpool are struggling. And this is just another nail in his coffin of, we've lost to Galatasaray, we didn't score, it's a poor result. But take the noise away, and I think this is a good result for Liverpool. Because, again, you're away from home, in a hostile atmosphere, against a Turkish team who are on a roll. To come out of there with just a 1-0 deficit, I think is very good for Liverpool, because the roles will be reversed. You know, we've seen over the years about the famous Anfield nights. And if Liverpool and the crowd get going, they can blow Galatasaray away. You know, I know people say, but Galatasaray beat Juventus. But, you know, Juventus had an awful lot to do in their home leg. And they almost did it. They forced the tie to extra time. But they were overpowered in the end. Liverpool have got to score 2 goals. You know, a 2-0 win is not beyond Liverpool. I know with the noise around Arne Slot, it looks one of the worst results they've ever had, but I think this is a good result. And this is what I would have expected from Manchester City, Real Madrid. A close game for Man City then to take into the home leg with a bigger chance of winning. So I think Liverpool, like Arsenal, are in a very good position to go through. I think Newcastle as well. That while they drew 1-1 with Barcelona, and Barcelona did score a very, last-minute penalty, I think that, to me, that result is expected. I did not expect Newcastle to blow Barcelona away. It might have done. But I also didn't expect Barcelona to come to this atmosphere of Newcastle and blow Newcastle away. So I think 1-1 is a kind of what I'd expect. Now, Newcastle have got an awful lot to do in the Nou Camp, and Barcelona will be favourites. But again, I don't think this is the best Barcelona team we've ever seen. You know, it's definitely nowhere near the Pep team, and it's not near the 2015 team. So I think Newcastle have got a good chance. Not as good a chance as, say, Arsenal and Liverpool have, but I think they've got a good chance. So 3 out of the 4 ties, Newcastle, Arsenal and Liverpool, I think yes, none of those clubs have won, but I think they've, at least Liverpool and Arsenal are in a good space to go to the next round. But now we come to the 2 5-2 results, Chelsea and Tottenham. And let's start with Chelsea, because I'm actually quite pleased they got battered by PSG, because I'm a little bit frustrated with Chelsea, and it's not, I don't know what Chelsea is these days. And I had a debate on social media with someone about a month ago about, I said Chelsea won a Mickey Mouse tournament in the summer, the Club World Cup, and people saying, oh, but they've beaten PSG in that final, and they've beaten Barcelona in the Champions League group and all of this. And I'm thinking, but if you'd asked PSG and Chelsea the same question at the beginning of last season, if you could win the Champions League or the FIFA World Club Cup, which would you rather win? And you'd ask the club, the fans, everybody related to those two clubs, 99% of people of those clubs would have said Champions League. So I get that Chelsea beat PSG in the final, but PSG had done their hard work. This competition they've striven for years. The Champions League, they'd done that. Yes, they wanted to win the Club Cup as well, but not at the same intensity. And the makeup of the Club Cup was just a joke. So for Chelsea to be beaten 5-2, now the tie can be turned around, of course. Miracles do happen. But, when it comes down to it, this result is not a shock. Yes, the scoreline, 5-2. But if you'd asked, most people in football, will Chelsea go and get a win in Paris? No. Will they get a draw? Maybe, but most likely they'll lose. So this isn't a shock. And, if you look at Chelsea since they won the Champions League in 2021, they've not been beyond a quarter-final. And let's not forget, they were in the Europa Conference League last season. So this isn't a vintage Chelsea team. It hasn't been for a while. This is not a Jose Mourinho Chelsea. or the Chelsea of, after Mourinho, of Lampard and Terry and people like that. This is a pretty bang average Chelsea side. So this result is not a shock. And that is the same for Tottenham. Again, the scoreline and how that came about. Yes, that is a shock. Tottenham had probably one of the worst first 20 minutes I've ever seen from an English club in a game. In a Champions League, the only comparable thing I've ever seen is Liverpool 3-0 down to AC Milan in the 2005 final. But that was because AC Milan was so good. Tottenham just imploded. I feel sorry for the goalkeeper because, it's horrible being a goalkeeper, making mistakes like that. And you're being thrown into a team who are not setting the world on fire. In fact, they can't win a game. So to lose to Atletico Madrid, I think most people expected that. 5-2, and the way it happened, not. But so that's not a shock. And, since they were runners-up in 2018-19 and finished fourth, they have finished fourth once since then. They finished 17th last season. They won the Europa League last season. So again, like Chelsea, we're not talking about a vintage Tottenham team, a Mauricio Pochettino team from kind of 2017, 18, 19. We're not talking about that team. So when we look at this in the cold light of day, I don't think English footballers suffered. I don't think, we need a 24-hour time to reflect. I think this is exactly where English football is. Arsenal, good position to go through. Liverpool, good position to go through. Man City, most likely going to go out. Chelsea and Tottenham will go out as expected, and Newcastle will most likely go out, but they've got a good chance. But they are not expected to go through against Barcelona. Now, I've seen a lot of the old arguments come up, especially on Wednesday, late Wednesday and into Thursday about, but English clubs play too many games, the FA Cup, and that, we need a winter break. And yet no one mentions that the Champions League has 8 group league phase games. That as English football, like let's take the FA Cup, for example, replays are non-existent. Why? Because the Champions League in European football keeps expanding. If you take away elements of English football, they will be filled by European football. I don't hear any arguments to say, well, the Champions League should go back to less games. Don't hear that argument. Take the League Cup, the Carabao Cup, for example. I don't see Manchester City and Arsenal and Chelsea playing their strongest 11s from the first game they play. They're playing their reserve players. They're, the players who aren't getting, regular Premier League games. Premier League teams are chopping and changing in the Champions League in the league phase. Not all the time. But so this argument of, but there's too many games. What do you want? You can't have a competitive Premier League, which is its selling point, and then complain about we have too many games. You can't have everything. And I know PSG asked, the French league to move a game, and between the Chelsea legs, and they did. Well, fine. I mean, English games, Jesus, they get moved around all the time. But it would cause uproar in the Premier League if Man City said, look, we're not playing this game. Ask the Premier League, we can't play this game Sunday because we're in between 2 legs against Real Madrid. Chelsea wouldn't be happy about that. Arsenal wouldn't be happy. Liverpool and anyone else. The problem here, I think, and like Man City, playing ties in Europe is different to the Premier League. It needs a different level of football, and you cannot go gung ho. And I think this always tests. And Bayern Munich, I think, will find this. I know Bayern Munich beat Atalanta 6-1, but what usually happens with Bayern Munich and what happened to PSG for years and years and years is once they came up against someone who was as good as them, they struggled. Their defence, they thought they had a great defence because they were walking their own leagues. And then they came up against a good team, who are on their level, and most of the times they got beaten. Now, that doesn't mean it happened all the time. And I think something like that happened to Manchester City against Real Madrid. Manchester City spend most of the time with the ball in the Premier League, and yet suddenly you're playing a team who can hit you hard. So I think this goes back to a little bit of overhyping English football to such an nth degree that's ridiculous. As I say, and I'll say it 100 times, English domination is when we win consecutive Champions Leagues for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. Until we do that, English domination is financial, and that's it. I don't care if we can sign and outspend every Serie A team, most teams in the Liga, most teams in Ligue 1, most teams in the Bundesliga. Until we win Champions Leagues consecutively, and we start seeing a lot more all-English finals, then I will never buy into this English domination. So then I will never buy into this, we need a 24-hour with sobering reality for Premier League clubs. So this is what I kind of want to, bring to this channel and say, have a look at my video from a month ago when I talked about the final week 8 of the league stage and the English domination then. And I will keep going on about it until people understand that so much noise around football. So I'll leave it there. We'll see what happens in the second legs. I fully expect Arsenal to go through, and I expect Liverpool to go through. And I wouldn't be surprised if Newcastle pulled off a result in Barcelona with a little bit of luck. I do not expect Tottenham to go through, and I do not expect Chelsea. And I got to be honest, I don't expect Man City. They might come close. But great. If any of those 3 teams get through, it will be brilliant. But we'll see. So let's look forward to the last 16 second leg ties next week.